For decades, the stories we have seen on our screens have painted a very consistent picture of domestic abuse. In movies, television shows, and even video games, the narrative is almost always the same. A man is the aggressor, and a woman is the victim. This repeated portrayal has deeply ingrained a specific image into our collective consciousness, making it difficult for many people to even imagine the roles being reversed. We see countless dramas where a husband's anger explodes into violence or a boyfriend's controlling nature leads to tragedy. These stories are important and reflect a harsh reality for many women, but they only tell half of the story, leaving an entire group of victims invisible and unheard in the public square. This one-sided narrative is not just a coincidence, it reflects a broader societal bias that has shaped our understanding of gender and violence. The idea of male strength and female vulnerability is a powerful trope that media creators often rely on to build conflict and evoke sympathy from the audience. For instance, in popular crime dramas, a female character with a bruised face immediately signals a domestic dispute where the male partner is the prime suspect. In video games like the early Grand Theft Auto series or films by creators like Tyler Perry, male characters are frequently depicted as sources of physical threat and aggression, reinforcing the stereotype that men are inherently more violent, and women are inherently the ones who need protection from them. The danger of this constant one-sided storytelling is that it creates a powerful confirmation bias in society. When we are only ever shown one version of a problem, we start to believe it is the only version that exists. This makes it incredibly challenging for male victims to be seen as credible when they come forward with their own experiences of abuse. Their reality clashes with the fictional world that has been presented to us over and over again. The media's failure to represent the full spectrum of domestic violence doesn't just distort reality, it actively contributes to a culture where male suffering is dismissed, downplayed, or even met with disbelief, creating a cycle of silence that is difficult to break. Ultimately, this limited perspective does a disservice to everyone. It reinforces harmful gender stereotypes that box both men and women into rigid roles. Men are taught that they must always be strong and invulnerable, while women are portrayed as perpetually in need of rescue. This not only erases the experiences of male victims but also ignores the capacity for aggression that exists in all human beings, regardless of their gender. To truly understand the complex nature of domestic abuse, we must first challenge the simple, incomplete stories we have been told. We need to acknowledge that abuse is a human problem, not a gender problem, and that victims can look very different from the ones we are used to seeing on our screens. While the dominant media narrative overwhelmingly shows men as perpetrators, there are rare but significant instances where the script is flipped, offering a glimpse into the reality of female-on-male abuse. These examples, though few and far between, are powerful because they challenge our preconceived notions and force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. One notable example in the world of video games is the character of Deborah in Grand Theft Auto V. Her partner, Floyd, is shown to be living in a state of constant fear and emotional turmoil. Deborah is verbally abusive, controlling, and ultimately violent, providing a stark and unsettling portrayal of a man trapped in an abusive relationship with a woman, a dynamic rarely explored in such a mainstream medium. Another powerful example that brought this hidden issue into the light is the recent documentary, My Wife, My Abuser, which has gained significant attention on platforms like Netflix. The film chronicles the harrowing, two-decade-long ordeal of a man who suffered relentless physical and psychological abuse at the hands of his wife. By providing a raw, unfiltered account of his experience, the documentary moves the issue from a theoretical possibility to a documented reality. It allows viewers to witness the manipulation, the violence, and the profound sense of helplessness that a male victim can endure. This kind of storytelling is crucial because it gives a face and a voice to the countless men who suffer in silence, validating their experiences on a global stage. These exceptions in media are vital because they break the mold and introduce a more nuanced understanding of abuse dynamics. When a character like Deborah appears in a massively popular game or a documentary like My Wife, My Abuser trends on a major streaming service, it plants a seed of awareness in the public mind. It forces audiences to consider that the simplistic man as abuser, woman as victim formula is not a universal rule. These portrayals can empower male victims to recognize the abuse they are experiencing and may even encourage them to seek help, knowing that they are not alone. They are small cracks in a very large wall, but they are essential for letting the light in. However, the scarcity of these examples highlights the very problem they seek to address. The fact that we can count such portrayals on one hand demonstrates how deeply entrenched the traditional narrative is. For every one Floyd, there are thousands of male characters written as aggressors. For every one documentary about a male victim, there are hundreds of films and shows focusing exclusively on female victims. While these rare glimpses are a step in the right direction, they are not enough. The media has a long way to go in representing the full, complex reality of domestic violence, and a more balanced and honest portrayal is desperately needed to foster a society that supports all victims, regardless of their gender. Daytime television has long served as a public stage where personal conflicts are aired for mass consumption, and on this stage, a clear double standard in judging domestic abuse has often been on full display. Famous television personalities, such as Dr. Phil McGraw, have built careers on offering advice to troubled guests, but their counsel has frequently reinforced the societal bias against male victims. Dr. Phil is widely known for his firm stance, often telling male guests, "You don't ever, never ever put your hands on a woman in anger." While this advice is sound on its surface, it is often delivered in a context where the woman's provocative or even physically aggressive behavior is minimized, excused, or overlooked entirely, which is a big problem. This unbalanced approach creates a dangerous and unfair dynamic. On these shows, when a woman admits to hitting, slapping, or throwing objects at her male partner, the conversation often shifts to her emotional state or what drove her to that point. The focus is on her pain, and her actions are framed as a cry for help. However, if a man admits to even retaliating in self-defense, such as pushing her away, he is swiftly condemned as an abuser. This public shaming, broadcast to millions of viewers, sends a powerful message. A woman's violence is an understandable reaction, while a man's reaction is an unforgivable crime. This reinforces the idea that men are solely responsible for controlling all physical conflict. The influence of hosts like Jerry Springer and Steve Wilkos, whose shows often sensationalized conflict, further cemented this narrative in the public consciousness. Their formats thrived on physical altercations, and audiences were often encouraged to cheer when a woman physically confronted a man who had wronged her. This spectacle normalized female-on-male violence, treating it as entertainment rather than a serious form of abuse. The implicit message was that it was acceptable, even righteous, for a woman to be physically aggressive, while a man was expected to passively endure it without any form of response. This creates a no-win situation for men, where they are judged for acting and judged for not acting. This pattern in the court of public opinion has real-world consequences beyond the television studio. It teaches society how to react to disclosures of domestic abuse. It conditions us to instinctively side with the female party and view the male party with suspicion. Men who have been abused watch these programs and learn that their experience will likely not be taken seriously. They see how other men are judged and ridiculed, and they absorb the lesson that speaking up will only lead to further humiliation. The unbalanced verdict delivered daily on our television screens helps to build the very wall of silence that keeps male victims trapped and isolated in their suffering. The legal system, which should be a source of impartial justice, often reflects the same gender biases seen in society and the media. In the United States, a landmark piece of legislation designed to protect victims of domestic violence is the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA. First passed in 1994, this act has provided billions of dollars in funding for programs that support female victims, including shelters, legal aid, and community outreach. While VAWA has been instrumental in helping countless women escape abusive situations, its very name highlights a significant gap in the legal framework. There is no corresponding Violence Against Men Act, which leaves many people with the impression that men are not in need of similar protections. While the services funded by VAWA are technically available to all victims regardless of gender, the focus and infrastructure are overwhelmingly geared toward women. This creates practical barriers for men seeking help. For instance, the vast majority of domestic violence shelters were historically designed as safe havens for women and their children, with many still unequipped or unwilling to house men. A man fleeing a violent female partner may have nowhere to go, as dedicated shelters for male victims are exceedingly rare. This lack of resources means that a man's choice is often between staying in an abusive home or becoming homeless, a devastating choice that no victim should ever have to make. This systemic gap extends beyond just housing. Men who do manage to seek legal protection, such as a restraining order, may face skepticism from law enforcement and the courts. Because authorities are conditioned to see the man as the likely aggressor, a male victim's plea for help can sometimes be met with disbelief. There are documented cases where a man called the police for help during a domestic dispute, only to be arrested himself when officers arrived on the scene. This wrongful arrest happens because of an underlying assumption that the man must have been the primary instigator, a bias that can turn a victim into a defendant in the blink of an eye. The absence of specific, high-profile legislation for male victims does more than just limit resources. It sends a powerful symbolic message. It tells men that the system does not see their suffering as a priority, or perhaps even as a reality. It reinforces the societal myth that men cannot be true victims of domestic abuse. For there to be genuine equality in the fight against domestic violence, the legal system must evolve. It needs to move beyond gender-specific language and frameworks to create a system that acknowledges, supports, and protects all victims, ensuring that a person's gender never determines their access to safety and justice. For a male victim of domestic abuse, the act of speaking up is often met with a formidable wall of silence, built from the bricks of societal shame and deep-seated stigma. Masculinity, as our culture has traditionally defined it, is equated with strength, control, and invulnerability. Men are taught from a young age not to cry, not to show weakness, and to always be in charge. When a man is being abused by his partner, his experience directly contradicts these powerful social expectations. Admitting to being a victim can feel like admitting to a failure of his own masculinity, leading to profound feelings of shame and inadequacy that keep him from ever telling anyone. This internal struggle is magnified by the fear of external judgment. A man who considers disclosing his abuse must brace himself for a range of dismissive and humiliating reactions. He may fear that his friends will ridicule him, that his family will not believe him, or that his community will see him as weak or pathetic. The common, thoughtless question, "Why didn't you just leave?" or "How could you let a woman do that to you?" places the blame squarely on the victim, ignoring the complex psychological and emotional manipulation that is often at the heart of coercive control. This societal shaming effectively silences men, forcing them to suffer alone rather than risk public humiliation. The systemic response, or lack thereof, further reinforces this wall of silence. When a man musters the courage to seek help, he often finds that the systems designed to protect victims are not designed for him. As previously mentioned, police officers may view him with suspicion, and he may even be wrongfully arrested. Healthcare professionals, conditioned to look for signs of abuse in female patients, may miss the signs entirely in a man. Therapists and counselors may lack the specific training needed to address the unique psychological trauma faced by male survivors. This systemic failure sends a clear message. We are not prepared to help you because we did not expect you to be a victim. This combination of internal shame and external failure creates a vicious cycle. The less men speak up, the less visible the problem becomes. The less visible the problem is, the fewer resources are dedicated to solving it. The lack of resources and support then discourages other men from coming forward, perpetuating the silence. Breaking this cycle requires a fundamental shift in our cultural conversation about masculinity and victimhood. We must create a society where a man's disclosure of abuse is met not with suspicion or ridicule, but with the same compassion, belief, and support that we would offer to any other victim. Section 6. The Invisible Wounds. Understanding the forms of abuse against men. When we think of domestic abuse, the image that most often comes to mind is one of physical violence, bruises, black eyes, and broken bones. While men certainly do experience severe physical assault from their female partners, including being hit, kicked, bitten, or attacked with objects or weapons, the abuse they endure is often far more insidious and multifaceted. Psychological and emotional abuse can be just as damaging as physical violence, yet it leaves no visible scars, making it much harder to prove and for others to understand. This form of abuse is a relentless campaign designed to strip a man of his self-worth and control his life from the inside out. Verbal abuse is one of the most common weapons in an abuser's arsenal. This can involve constant criticism, name-calling, and insults aimed at a man's core identity. An abusive partner might relentlessly call him useless, stupid, pathetic, or a failure as a man, a father, or a provider. This constant barrage of negativity is designed to erode his confidence and make him feel worthless. Over time, the victim may start to believe these insults, leading to a state of learned helplessness where he feels trapped and powerless to change his situation. It's a form of mental warfare that can be just as debilitating as any physical blow, slowly chipping away at his soul. Coercive control is another devastating form of abuse that men experience. This is a strategic pattern of behavior designed to make a person dependent and subordinate by isolating them from support, exploiting their resources, and depriving them of their independence. A female abuser might control all the family finances, preventing her partner from having access to his own money. She might isolate him from his friends and family, monitor his phone calls and social media, or threaten to make false allegations of abuse against him if he ever tries to leave. These tactics create an invisible prison, leaving the man feeling completely trapped and cut off from any outside help or perspective. The impact of these non-physical forms of abuse cannot be overstated. The invisible wounds of emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse can lead to severe, long-term consequences, including chronic anxiety, deep depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The constant stress of living in a state of fear and degradation takes a heavy toll on a man's mental and physical health. It is crucial for society to recognize that abuse is not defined solely by physical violence. The silent, invisible wounds are just as real and just as destructive, and they deserve the same level of attention, validation, and intervention as any physical injury. Section 7. The sobering numbers statistics that tell a different story. While personal stories and media portrayals shape our emotional understanding of domestic abuse, statistics provide the hard data that can challenge our deepest biases. For a long time, the issue of male victimization was dismissed as rare or insignificant, but a growing body of research from around the world paints a very different picture. The numbers show that men constitute a significant portion of domestic abuse victims, a fact that has been systematically underreported and overlooked for decades. These statistics are not meant to diminish the experiences of female victims, but to broaden our understanding of the true scope of the problem. In the United States, data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, reveals a startling reality. According to their National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, over 1 in 4 men, approximately 25%, will experience some form of physical violence, rape, or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. While the rate for women is higher, at over 1 in 3, the figure for men is far from negligible. It translates to millions of men who have suffered abuse at the hands of a partner. These are not isolated incidents, but a widespread public health issue that has remained largely hidden in plain sight, obscured by societal expectations and reporting biases. The situation is similar in other Western countries. In England and Wales, official statistics for the year ending March 2023 showed that approximately 1 in 3 victims of domestic abuse was male. This data, from the Office for National Statistics, helps to dismantle the myth that domestic violence is exclusively a female issue. A 2024 study from Northern Ireland further highlighted the problem of underreporting, finding that while nearly 20% of intimate partner abuse victims are male, over half of those men never report the abuse to anyone. This suggests that the official statistics, as high as they are, may still only represent the tip of the iceberg, with many more men suffering in complete silence. These numbers are a sobering wake-up call. They command us to look past our assumptions and confront the factual reality of domestic violence. The data proves that men are not just occasional victims. They are a substantial demographic whose needs have been largely ignored by support services, legal systems, and public discourse. Acknowledging these statistics is the first step toward creating a more inclusive and effective response to domestic abuse. When we understand the true scale of the problem, we can no longer justify the lack of resources and support for male survivors. The numbers don't lie, and they tell a story that we can no longer afford to ignore. Section 8. The hidden toll: mental health and the cost of silence. The consequences of domestic abuse extend far beyond any physical injuries. For male victims, the psychological and emotional toll is often devastating, compounded by the isolation and lack of validation they experience. When a man is abused, he is not just dealing with the actions of his abuser, he is also fighting a lonely battle against societal expectations of masculinity that tell him he should be strong and unaffected. This internal conflict, combined with the trauma of the abuse itself, creates a perfect storm for severe mental health crises. The silence that surrounds male victimization is not just quiet, it is deadly, leading to profound and lasting damage. Depression and anxiety are among the most common mental health outcomes for abused men. Living in a constant state of fear, uncertainty, and degradation wears down a person's emotional resilience. The relentless verbal attacks, the controlling behaviors, and the threat of physical violence can trigger chronic anxiety, panic attacks, and a deep sense of hopelessness that characterizes clinical depression. Without access to support systems or therapy, these conditions can spiral out of control, affecting a man's ability to work, parent, and function in his daily life. The abuser effectively rewires his brain to exist in a perpetual state of fight or flight, which is emotionally and physically exhausting. Perhaps the most alarming consequence of this hidden suffering is the increased risk of suicide. A 2024 study conducted in Northern Ireland delivered a shocking finding: over 70% of male victims of domestic abuse had contemplated suicide. When a man feels he has nowhere to turn, that no one will believe him, and that he is trapped with no way out, suicide can begin to feel like the only escape from the pain. The societal stigma and lack of resources directly contribute to this tragic outcome. By failing to provide adequate support for male victims, we are failing to prevent these preventable deaths. The silence surrounding their suffering is literally costing men their lives. This hidden toll highlights the urgent need for a more compassionate and informed approach. We must recognize that the trauma of abuse is not gender-specific. The pain, fear, and despair felt by a victim are universal human experiences. For men, this trauma is often amplified by the loneliness of their struggle. Building robust support systems, including accessible shelters, trained therapists, and public awareness campaigns, is not just a matter of fairness, it is a critical mental health intervention. Acknowledging their pain and providing them with a path to healing is essential to mitigating the devastating psychological cost of abuse in silence. Section 9. A call for true equality, recognizing every victim. The journey to end domestic violence requires a path wide enough for all victims to walk upon. For too long, our focus has been narrow, concentrated primarily on the undeniable suffering of women and children while leaving male victims standing in the shadows. To achieve true and meaningful progress, we must expand our perspective and embrace a more inclusive definition of victimhood. This is not about creating a battle of the sexes, or diminishing the severity of violence against women. It is about acknowledging a simple, fundamental truth. Abuse is wrong, no matter who the perpetrator is and no matter who the victim is. Compassion should have no gender. Achieving this vision of true equality requires concrete action on multiple fronts. First, our media and cultural institutions must commit to more honest and balanced portrayals of domestic abuse. We need more stories that challenge outdated stereotypes and reflect the complex reality that violence can flow in any direction within a relationship. Second, our legal systems must be reviewed and reformed to ensure that they are truly gender-neutral in both letter and practice. This means funding and creating resources, like shelters and support services, that are accessible and welcoming to men, and training law enforcement and judicial personnel to recognize and respond to male victimization without bias. Furthermore, we must fundamentally change the conversation in our communities, schools, and homes. We need to teach our sons that vulnerability is not a weakness, and that asking for help is a sign of courage. We need to teach all of our children that violence is never an acceptable way to solve problems, regardless of one's gender. By dismantling the harmful stereotypes of masculinity that trap men in silence, we can create a culture where a male victim feels just as empowered to speak his truth as a female victim does. This cultural shift is the bedrock upon which all other forms of progress will be built. In the end, the goal is simple: A world where no victim of domestic abuse has to suffer in silence. A world where every call for help is answered with belief, every cry of pain is met with compassion, and every person, regardless of gender, has a clear path to safety and healing. By breaking the silence on male victims, we are not taking away from anyone else's struggle. We are adding our voices to a universal chorus calling for an end to violence. Recognizing every victim is the only way to achieve genuine gender equality and build a society that is truly safe for everyone. Today, on July 28, 2025, let this be our renewed commitment.